Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan, he is Mac.
Hi!
We do this show in order to, review pieces of art, may it be movies or TV shows or video games or music, in order to then further discuss and articulate our thoughts and understand the quality and the love that these pieces of art have sort of portrayed and put out into the universe. And so we are continuing our crusade, our adventure through HBO's The Wire. One of, if not the best television show to have ever existed. And we have just finished watching season 4 of The Wire. Both Mac and I are incredibly excited to get into this episode due to just the sheer quality of this particular season. I don't think it's a stretch to say that this is the best season of the show. Landslide.
And the other ones were very good, obviously. But
yes.
This is really what takes the show to from a great show to one of the best shows, arguably. Not just my favorites, but one of the best shows that I think might have ever been made.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And so we kind of talked about this season briefly because it is commonly referred to as the school season, or the season that takes place in the school, or like the students, right? Because this season introduces 4 extremely important characters who are all kids: Naaman, Michael, Randy, and Dookie. So not only are we getting a lot of characters, from seasons past and continuing their stories, may it be, characters that got a lot of love and maybe less love now, or vice versa, we are also introduced to these 4 8th graders and how they play a role and who they are in the city of Baltimore. But what makes me also partially excited, and I wouldn't say trepidated, but I'm just intrigued by whatever conversation is going to follow, because as it has been discussed on this podcast before, and in case you do not know, Mac is a middle school teacher.
Yeah, right.
So, Mac, I do want to lead right off of the bat.
Oh, okay.
Firstly, what were your first impressions of the season, and what was the sort of roller coaster of emotion this season took you on? Because at least for me, there were so many points in this season where it was just stress was bubbling over. And it's not the sort of stress, for example, from Parasite or something that you would see in a thriller. I think the best way to articulate the stress in this movie is not necessarily worrying about the characters, but it's more so for me worrying about the lives of these people. But as you are a school teacher, Mac, I think primarily, what did this season leave you feeling?
The most difficult part of this entire season was that it reminded me of very specific kids that I teach.
Yeah.
At certain characters, I was like, that's this kid. And that's this kid, and that's this, and it was, and that was before I even really knew that this season was a school season. I knew that we were going to get to the schools at some point, but we've kind of talked about schools and touched on schools prior. But this season was the one that obviously dove really hard into it, and before I even really knew that, I was already thinking like that. And so it was especially difficult. At first, it was really hard to find it in myself to keep watching the show because I spend so much time in a classroom setting and especially so much time just trying to keep my cool and keep power and keep my reputation, because right now it's a very important thing to keep your reputation and make sure that all the kids, not just in your class, but all the kids in the entire school that are hearing about you, have a good impression of you, especially because I'm a theater teacher, I'm trying to grow the program, right? I'm trying to gain my numbers and get kids to come and want to do it. It's not just math where I'm like, well, you have to. Right. It's theater where it's if you don't want to, then we're both going to have a really, really fucking bad time.
Right.
And so I can't be the asshole on campus, right? But it's also really difficult because I want to be sometimes. And so watching the immense control from Pryzbylewski at first was just stressful. It was hard for me to watch for about the first half of the season.
Yeah,
because I was like, God, I get this like every day. I don't want to keep doing like watching this whenever I'm at home. And then whenever it kind of turned into he realized that the way that you get them interested in the class is if you become part of their lives and get interested in them outside of the classroom setting.
And you connect with them.
Yeah, and you start learning about them and really,
like beyond them being students and learning about them as people.
Yeah, and he starts doing that, which I love, because that's real, and it's cool to see him grow, Pryzbylewski grow in the community and realize, you know what I mean? Oh wow, there was this being a cop. There was this entire community that I didn't even know existed, and I never saw this side of it.
Yeah, and the realization for him that, like I'm also here, I'm playing an important role, maybe an even more important role to other people's lives.
Yes, right.
And kind of like it's never like a moment in the show where Prez sort of looks in the mirror and saying, "I'm changing kids' lives." No. But it's this very gradual where you look at when you look at Pryzbylewski at the first episode and you compare it to the last episode and how much he cherishes like the lives and cares about the lives of these kids. It's one of the most beautiful growths of character in this season, partially because of how understated it is.
Yeah. And there's really something. Oh God, there's really something to him realizing I have the potential to change their course in life, and I was a cop, so I've seen their course. I know what this is.
Yeah,
and I have the potential to change it, and by the end of the season, you see, and he realizes that about 99% of the time,
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
And that's something they were talking about with the professor early on in the season, right? Is that he was talking about like, oh well, you know, like I wanted to do like a study on like violence in teens and everything. He's like, so I was gonna get like a couple like 17-year-olds or whatever, and then Bunny and what was his name? I can't remember. But they were just like, oh, that's too old.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't know. And then they showed him a 17-year-old, and he was like, okay, maybe younger. And then they just kept going down in age to finally find like, okay, maybe 12 and 13-year-olds. That's our demographic. Like that's where it starts. That's where it starts, where they start down the path of violence, and they might get involved in gang life, and that's where the transition is.
Yeah.
But not even. It's earlier than that.
Yeah.
And not only is it earlier than that, it's pretty much you're born into it, and unless you're taken out of the environment entirely, that's pretty much it. It's not a matter of like individual gain or individual like something that you do on an individual level. It's not really that. It is if you are in that environment, if you are around people that want that, there's no getting away from it. You see it in Namond, right?
Yeah.
Him and his mom go and see his dad at
Who
visiting
is
hours.
Weebay?
Who's Weebay? Right.
An important side character in the first season, and I want to say, I want to give this show immense credit, and welcome to our new bit, because we do bits here because we only do 2 segments. We would call them segments, but really we only do 2 segments, so we do a bit. And so this bit, I would like to call Heady Play.
I love it.
Really, the whole thing of Heady Play is I just want to point out something really, really smart this show did. And I think one of the smartest things this show did was not just Weebay, but introducing those 4 kids and having the sort of what I like to call the degrees of connections to other characters not be far off. So, for example, Naaman Bryce is Weebay's kid, right?
Yeah.
So Weebay, we already know prior. We get introduced to a new character who is already literally related to a character we just met. Michael, for example, goes to Cuddy's gym, right? Mm-hmm. And then how they introduced all these 4 characters too, all 4 of them go, at first at least, before things kind of separate, go to class, Pryzbylewski's class, right? I think one of the things that kind of brought back season 2, for example, is that it introduced all these characters, and most of them had no degrees of connections to already existing characters. Mind you, we had a giant cast in the first season, and really the only example of sort of degrees of connection was some of the Greeks with Prop Joe, and that was kind of it. But here we have a lot more deeper connections kind of starting out to these kids and who they are and how they are sort of literally and more metaphorically related to everyone else. And I think it really aided into the storytelling of this because it had just allowed for a much smoother introduction of these kids and how it just didn't feel out of place at all. Like it felt like these kids have been characters from the very first season and have belonged since the very first season. And so this was just a time to introduce those 4 people. So I really want to give the show credit.
That's genius
for that.
No, I 100% agree with that. That they really did a good job with that, and that was something that set this season apart for sure. The fact that we were able to bring back other things, and that we were able to talk, I think, a few times about the Greeks, which we haven't really, but like we were able to talk about that, and everything came to fruition in a lot of different ways, which was nice. And I do want to get to that again soon.
Yeah.
But so they're talking about kids that get into it too early, and that there's not really a way of stopping it unless you stop like the entire system itself, which I think is like the whole show, right? But there's really no way of like and another thing that you were just talking about is that it is all in the family, it's all in the people that you know. And there's never been a kid that's been like just some random suburban kid. They're like, you know what, I want to be in a gang. And then like goes out of their way to find a fucking gang.
And we discussed it in our episode discussing the third season too. The third season as well, I should say, is that like it's so much easier for these kids to participate in those things. And we see it doubly so here in this season that it's not only, it's literally outside of their doors. For some of them, and it's their friends. It's the people they go to school with. It's everywhere.
They literally play games. They're playing Omar. Remember that?
Yes, the kids are playing Omar in the third season. And we see it again here in the fourth season. Crazy. And it's just it's part of it is heart-wrenching. And what partially also what makes this season particularly heart-wrenching is the actions by adults, and we see actually sort of like firsthand how much they could affect the lives of these kids. And for the vast majority of the characters, they do something that affects either like the 4 main kids, the 4 main teenagers, or other kids just generally, right? And I think a really good example is continuing the storyline of now Mayor Carcetti. And for example,
who I love, by the way.
Yes, and like his character is just interesting to watch.
He killed
Aidan Gillen just does a great job. First of all, as a person from the UK, and then just pulls off this crazy dialect. He does a really good job of nailing it, and then. Also, but particularly what his character does is that towards the end, I think at the very last episode, and towards the end, he realizes, entering my, seat as mayor, there is a gigantic deficit. And the first thing that's going to suffer is the school system. And so he has the opportunity to maybe take money from, I believe, some other elected official, I believe the governor of Maryland. And he chooses not to take the governor's money. And that money would have been used to at least aid the school system, or at least not make it as bad as it potentially could be in the future. And to see, like, that's just one action, right? That's just one example of one person's actions. Because Carcetti wants to further his political career, which one side you can say, okay, I understand that. Like, I understand somebody wanting to pursue their own ambitions. From that baseline alone, I perfectly understand that, right? But then you have his, like, sort of, at first his campaign manager, and then I believe, like, his right-hand man, I don't know the proper position title for that, is disappointed in him because he didn't take the money because people's lives who are going to get messed up are the children, and he knows that, right?
Yeah.
And we don't see the one-to-one effect of that yet, but we know that is going to be affected tremendously. Then we have somebody like Herc, who also wants to further his career and is trying to use Randy, one of the kids, as a sort of witness in a case, and because he's trying to get a case, underway and solved, and that's a really big thing for him because he's finding himself digging himself deeper and deeper into a hole, and then it sort of ends up screwing up Randy's entire life. That the very last shot you see of Randy in this show is him being left in this group home because he was called a snitch. People found out he was a snitch, so they got Molotov cocktails, threw it into his home, and because his foster mother was so badly hurt, no longer able to take care of him, put in a group home, and the final shot of him is him going toe-to-toe with 4 other dudes in his bedroom, to such a point that, like, I still haven't watched an episode of the 5th season, and every single day after I saw the finale of the 4th season, I thought about that moment, to such a point that, like, I don't know if Randy is even alive. And like, how the show, like, just thinking about it now, like, I'm almost brought to tears because it genuinely terrifies me that one kid's life was ruined to such an umpteenth degree, an extraordinary amount, because somebody just wanted to further his career. And because he was not caring about what he was doing to other people's lives, he potentially indirectly killed a kid. And I think about that last shot on Randy every single day since I've watched that episode. I think it's a very real possibility we start season 5 and maybe we either, like, we don't see Randy at all, and that's maybe partially because Randy is dead. And then maybe that's not the case because like, would those kids in the group home kill Randy? Probably not, because they wouldn't get away with it, but all the same, like, I don't know, like, the possibility is there. And how this show was able to make me view Randy not only as a character, but also as a person in this, I hate to say society, but, like, functioning in this community. I wish I could find more ways to properly articulate how the show did that, but I'm still tremendously impressed that, like there are not often times that I finish a piece of media and I think about it every day. And this season of The Wire has done that for me. I
cannot agree more. Something reminiscent of what the subject you're talking about happened in real life recently. There was, I don't know if you've heard about this at all. In Plain ISD, have you heard anything?
I don't think so, no.
The bullying thing? Okay. So,
what?
The bullying thing? Okay.
Okay, no, I have not. It sounded like you said boing. And I'm like, that sounds very different than what we're discussing.
The bullying thing, sorry.
No,
there's a kid at middle school in our district. And it's gone public, so it's not like I'm like not spilling any tea. Although I did know about it before it was...
before it went public.
Public, because all of my kids knew. Because it was like in the community. Like, they knew, and like they had all the videos of everything that happened, and they were showing me, and I was like, I can't see that shit, put that away. And it was... there was a kid who, in the boys' locker room, was shot with a BB gun, and then held down and forced to drink a water bottle filled with urine that was passed around by all the white kids in the locker room. And this kid was a black kid. And they were, like, chanting the N-word at him. And there's and one of them was dumb enough to take a video and post on his Instagram story. And there was a bunch of stuff like, and this was not the only case. Not only that, the kid, there had been reports. All like they looked at this like at their file or whatever, like from, because they take reports every single time that like parents called at school and everything. And the mom had called several times to complain because the coaches weren't watching what was happening in the locker rooms.
Right.
And that had happened several times before. And there was also a time where apparently he was like having an asthma attack and was asking for his inhaler. And his coach was telling him that he was only saying it to get out of running.
No.
And so he had an asthma attack and had to suck it up for a while, and then eventually like collapsed and had to go to the hospital. And then he went back to school, and then this happened, which is crazy. And so this happens, and we're all like, we're all sitting there like, what the hell's going to happen from this? Like, how is the school district going to cover this one up? You can't. And then the superintendent comes out and is like, we're trying to, make sure that the kids that did it get properly, punished for it, and that, we're investigating with the teachers that were involved and everything, and it was just like a really bad moment for PISD, and we were kind of like, I don't know if that's the right. That kind of feels weird, like. That feels a little bit slimy because it like insincere so many times. Yeah, and very distant. And so I sat down,
like not taking into account like whether actively or inactively or directly or indirectly, like we screwed up a child's life.
Exactly. And so we, me and a couple other teachers, we were talking to one of the people up at admin. Administration's like the higher ups, and we were like, why was Plano ISD so unable to just take the fall? Like, why couldn't? It's public money. It's taxpayers. It's not like private companies collapsing, whatever. Like, no one's getting like totally moved except the people that are supposed to. Why can't they just admit or talk about the problems like through the chain that they really need to discuss, because this is not the first time it's happened. Like this is so recurring,
and like with this kid
especially, that like it happened so many times and like nothing was done about it. And the response was a kind of similar one to The Wire, which was, we want to make sure that whatever happens to this kid is appropriate and right, and like that this kid gets as much as he can, but at the same time, we can't lose public trust.
Yeah.
I was like, that's really it. Like, pretty much, yeah. Because we just got a bond. We had a bond year, which meant like we got a bunch of taxes raised for about a year so that we could get a bunch of new facilities. And we were in the middle of building those facilities, and COVID hit, and we ran out of money. And we're going to have to ask for more money from taxpayers, and people vote on it every year.
That if the school says, "Hey, it's our fault," then why would anybody
vote to give the money to
that school, right? And then like if you're a parent, why would you even willingly send your child there?
Right.
Just put them in a different public school or in a private school.
Yeah, exactly. Or there are awesome school districts directly surrounding Plano ISD that's really easy to get into.
Yeah.
So like, why wouldn't you? Yeah, and it was absolutely crazy, and like it still blows my mind how many moments from this show I was like, damn, lived that. Like, damn, that's true. Damn, that shit happens every day. And like literally, a couple, like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there. I get this kid in my class, and do you know what Go Guardian is?
I do not.
Okay, Go Guardian is both a kind of creepy. Like at first I felt slimy, but now I'm like, this was awesome, because all the kids have laptops. Like all the money was spent that we were supposed to have on like all these facilities and everything on, so the kids could get laptops so they could do online school-ish. Because like obviously now the online school is like dissipated a little bit, but so that they could do online school at first. And so all these kids are working on laptops all the time, but all the laptops are hooked up to a program called Go Guardian so that we can see what's on their screens at all times and know what tabs are open, things like that. And so I'm in the middle of class and I see something on some kid's laptop and I'm like, that's kind of weird, whatever. So like I close them out of the tab because I can do that, and which is nice. And I finish up my lecture, whatever, and I have kids like starting to work on their assignments, and I kind of walk over to him and I'm like, what were you looking up? And he was like, nothing, man. And I was like, no, you were looking up like you were typing very alarming things, and I just like want to figure this out, me and you, because I don't want to like take it to someone else. And he was like, would you really go do that? And I was like, I mean, yeah, I think I would have to if you didn't tell me what's going on. And he was like, okay. And so it turned out he was looking up, like, creepily specific in Google, like the name of this person, like name, murder, Dallas, and then like a date, like 2/21 or whatever, and like all this information. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of spooky. And then like he's just reading all these articles. And so I was like, why the hell are you doing this? Like, why are you looking this up? It's so strange. And he was like, well, I haven't talked to my brother in a while, and I wanted to make sure that he wasn't involved. And I was like, why would he have been involved? And he was like, and this is like a 12-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, because the guy that happened to, like, I kind of knew growing up. And I know that they were close. And I know they were in the same gang. And I wouldn't be shocked if he was involved in some way. So I wanted to see if he was on any articles. And I was like, okay, you can continue Googling. Like, go ahead. I mean, maybe try to do that on, like, not school time. But I'm not going to stop you, I suppose, because that's a pretty valid thing. And, I mean, this kid, and this kid also breaks my heart. This kid reminds me so much of Michael, because
Michael in the show.
No, I'm not saying some kid's name. Don't worry. I just reveal the first and last name and the telephone number and the address. Did your heart drop for a second?
No, I'm just like,
just the idea.
It's just like, who's Michael? I was trusting you just betrayed.
No,
No.
And so So, but like literally, there was one time where, because I hadn't really noticed that this was like a thing. I didn't really pay attention to wardrobe or clothes or colors. I didn't really think about that. That wasn't really in my mind whenever I started teaching, I guess. Which I guess was ignorant of me. Because literally one time after school, I know that he's like leaving out a certain exit, right? And so I walk out and his car is like right there. Like where he's about to get in his car to
When
go
you
home.
say his car, like his parents or
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it's like driving 12-year-old.
I don't know why I'm asking these questions.
It's fine. So
like, obviously, like.
But I can tell that it's not his parents. I'm thinking like maybe it's a sibling or a cousin or something like that, right? And like I don't think much of it. But I go over to him and I'm like, "Hey man, so like you turned in like your work or whatever, and like it was missing this and this and this. Like I wanted to just like make sure you did that. So over the weekend, like could you work on that, turn that in, and like it won't be a late grade if you turn it in over the weekend.
Sure.
Like I'll just grade real fast."
Yeah.
And I didn't think anything of it. Next week, he comes in and he's being like really weird, not as talkative as normal, and also kind of aggressive, like intentionally disrespecting everything. And I'm kind of getting weird vibes. And so he starts talking out a little bit more in class and like being a little more disruptive. And I'm like, okay, like, do we need to have a little chat? And he's like, no. And I'm like, okay. And then he keeps doing something. I'm like, okay, out in the hall, let's go. We go out in the hall and I'm like, what's up, man? And he was like, honestly, because he's like, honestly, Welch, deal is, you came up and talked to me after school. I was going hang out with my friends, and it could put a really bad taste in their mouth because you were wearing red. And I was like, are you kidding? And he was like, no. And I was like, why is that? Oh shit! Like I didn't even think about it. Like that was like some sort of like
that was a
factor
thing.
Yeah, that was something that he looks at. And then I've noticed since I'm like, oh, that dude really never wears red. Like, he never does because he can't. Like, that's really a thing in his life that he's like, that color is them, and my color's blue, and that's it. Like, that's it. It's as simple as that. Whenever I go home, that's all I see is blue. And I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And he was like, it doesn't bother me if you're, doing that or whatever, but it's more like outside of school, just like, I don't want you to have to. And I was like, okay, well, you shouldn't have to worry about that. And if you ever have any troubles, like, please tell me, we can go find someone. Like, I'm a resource. And like, obviously I went and told the campus police officer just because he's a cool guy. And I was like, hey man, we don't have to do anything about it, but just like be aware that I had this interaction and it was really sketchy. And I want to make sure that like we're taking care of this kid, But yeah, man. And I mean, I have told you the stories of just one kid, and this happens all the damn time. And it's like, it's nonstop. And I know that if I pulled a Presbolewski and I just like very sly cop style, just like drove around and like found these kids or whatever, oh man, they're doing shit all the time. They're doing shit all the time. And it's not all kids. Clearly not all kids.
Because, like, also, you don't know.
Not nearly as bad as what the school that they were showing in there. Yeah. Like, in there, like, in the show, there's really, like 10 kids that you see ever that are even paying attention to him. And that's not necessarily what my school is at all. But, like, there are still plenty of kids that we've had cases where if they don't show up to school or they don't log in online or start doing their work for a while, I'm like, oh, they're in juvie for sure. And they come back and they're like, yeah, I was. And it's like because they were like stealing or because they're like, for some reason it's become more and more popular to like hotwire cars. Don't know why, but a bunch of kids that I know that have been like hotwiring cars and like stealing cars and shit. I don't know. But, yeah, man, it's weird. It's weird. But, like, that was what was looping through my mind continuously as I was watching the show was just, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. This is so consistent. And this is exactly what the hell happened.
The show does an exceptional job of showing how easy it is for people who should be taking care of those kids to do things that are totally counterintuitive for those kids' best interests.
Yeah.
And with the teachers, with nearly all the teachers, particularly like the principal or the assistant principal, for example, and at least in the school system, the emphasis, because we got this when we were kids too.
Yeah.
But it really hurt these kids here, the emphasis on standardized testing.
Oh, yeah, right.
And how important it is for the school to get kids to do well on standardized testing.
Because that's all that matters. The numbers is all that matters to the state.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of money comes from.
And that is something that we experienced when we were kids.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was watching it and I was like, I actually experienced some of the stupidity, and I would actually also hear it from the teachers too. Like the teachers, some of them would tell us straight up, like, "Hey, this is really, really dumb." But it is also simultaneously, even though you guys shouldn't be doing this, it is in your best interest to do well on this anyways.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's the ultimate truth, I don't know. But at the same time, it was just so clear that, so once again, just like in the third season where so much of the police system was interested in the numbers, so is the school system.
Yeah, right,
and
right.
the grading and the test grades of these kids, and how the numbers actually reflect who they are, but they don't.
Making decisions are never going to see these kids in real life.
Exactly.
All they know is the numbers.
Yes, and all they have to do is go to a desk in some building, which is fine. I don't blame them for that per se. I don't blame them for that career choice, but and it's a very difficult decision. But at the same time, it's so easy for them to make a decision that they think is going to help these kids that is actually screwing up the lives of kids that need help the most. Yeah. And then you also see it with, of course, some police officers, notably in this season. I believe his name is Officer Walker, where he's just the worst. and he steals, and he's a complete asshole, and he breaks the fingers of this one kid because he stole a car. Mind you, the kid stole a car. Fine. But then it's how the officer treats it.
Yeah.
And then just, I mean, the show messes me up because once again, it's not like all of these kids, all of these people, all the people in the show are like innocent, right? Like, Preston Bodie dies in this season,
which I want to talk about heavily.
Yes, and we're gonna get to our break in a moment, but I want to mention that Preston Bodie dies in this season, and like, at least for me, I don't know about you, I was like, damn, like that's it, you know, and there goes his life, you know, even though he helped kill Wallace in the first season.
I was about to freaking bring up Wallace. Yes.
That
shit never leaves your mouth. That taste never leaves your mouth.
But it's incredible how the show can do both, right? It's not like Bodie is just an asshole. He's just an awful human being. Like, it's both. Like, he is like an awful human being for killing Wallace, but he's also like deep down a good person because he cares about his friends. Except for Wallace, I guess.
Oh God.
But that's the big thing that I want to
Jordan.
But now let's hear a good old word from our sponsors.
All right, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Now just let me explain. First of all, it's free. Second of all, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a whole bunch more. And third, now this is really important, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Hear me when I say no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Hello and welcome back to the Artenders with Mac and Dan. We left off talking about Preston Brodus, also known as Bodie in the show. I wanted to start with this one purely because...
Pretty sure it's Brodus. I'm just messing with
you. Is it really?
I think it is Brodus, but who cares?
Yeah, at this point, you never hear that. Never hear that. Maybe in the first season or some shit. Yeah. Okay, anyway. So, Bodie. The reason that I want to talk about Bodie... his death, I think, was one of the more impactful deaths on the show. It was the one that I think really got me, because in my mind, even though Avon Barksdale or Dee or Stringer Bell or all these people that had awesome deaths.
Avon didn't die.
Sorry.
What's wrong with you today?
I know, I'm off my game.
But to your point.
But yeah, they Stringer Bell especially had an awesome scene with their death. Bodie, for some reason, hit a little bit different, because in my mind, for some reason, as I've been watching the show, that's been the character that has really represented this entire show for me. That has really represented Baltimore and the gang scene and just all that. He has.
And in the transition from teenager to adult as well.
And I think it's partially because in my mind, McNulty was introduced to me as the main character of the cops, of the legal system.
Of that side.
Yeah. And I don't mean legal system like lawyers. I mean we're talking about the system. That's what The Wire is about, the system. And there's one side of the system that is the legal system, and there's the one side of the system that is the illegal system. And I would say that McNulty has been the main character of this one side, and it feels like Bodie has been the main character of this other side, in that they're kind of foiled. Not kind of, they are foils.
Yeah.
They're very similar. They've played similar roles in their communities and in their circles.
And they both recognize that they're sort of cogs in the machine.
Yeah.
As well.
Which leaves you with that lovely scene with them.
I love that scene.
That's maybe one of my favorite scenes. Single scenes of the whole thing.
So, McNulty helps get Bodie out of prison. I actually forget for why Bodie was just overnight prison for some reason. But to the point, McNulty helps get him out, so then they go have lunch at this arboretum in Baltimore, and it's just I don't know how to explain it aside from like sublime and tranquil. That the scene was that you kind of look at the scene and you kind of say to yourself like, there's a reality where these two are like best buds.
Right, and it totally makes sense because Bodhi has really been so unbelievably loyal.
Yes,
in like the entire series, he's been nothing but loyal, and like with Wallace, for instance, season 1, right?
That was a test of loyalty. So
sad, so hard to watch, but yeah, at the end of the day, and it puts a bad taste in your mouth. But at the end of the day, yeah, it was exactly that. It was exactly that. It was a test of loyalty. It was, are you going to be a soldier for me? And from moment one, he was, and everything he's done since then has been that. Even though Marlowe is now head of the streets, and even though he has to start working with Marlowe this season, he's still going to stay loyal to Avon.
Yeah, but it's not even just like Avon, like the person.
Yeah.
It's now, like in this season, I don't even think we see a lick of Avon, but it's Avon the ideal.
Yeah.
And it's Avon how he treated the streets of the city of Baltimore, where Bodhi...
He's like, there are rules.
Yes, and Bodhi felt like Marlowe was breaking those rules every instant, just killing a man for breathing wrong. And Avon would never do that. Avon would still put hits on people. I mean, but Avon would understand that, like we saw in the third season, for example. Like, it's Sunday. Don't try to kill Omar Sunday morning when he's helping his grandmother go to church.
Right.
That is off limits. What are you doing? And so there was like a code that Avon, and from what we're told, other people in Baltimore lived by. And what made Marlowe such an interesting person to look at was how much he ignored this code. I wish we would see more sides of Marlowe per se, but I think there has been a moment where I'm like, oh, Marlowe is two-dimensional. We're not getting enough of Marlowe. It's kind of been like, my God, like this guy's just a scary person.
Yeah.
And like, I'm interested in his like wants and desires, but I'm kind of also getting the sense from the show like, oh, like this person very much so exists. Like not everybody has to be super duper in depth, but there's also the person that just enjoys what they're doing, and Marlowe just happens to enjoy running this operation. And maybe like we can put some labels on it. Maybe deep down he's getting this sort of power satisfaction from doing this all.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, that's what makes Marlowe so different. And scary is a strong word, but so much more off-putting compared to Stringer and compared to Avon.
There's definitely a bit of Marlowe that I want so bad to know his like deep rooted motivations, right? Like what is his backstory and everything. But at the same time, honestly, a lot of his decisions make sense to me. Like as I'm watching them, I'm like, you know what? Like, if you're trying to come off as a stone cold killer, and if you actually want to scare people on the streets and gain power, he's doing it in a very efficient way.
Incredibly efficient.
And it makes total sense, honestly, if that's what his goal is, to do it the way that he's done it. Genius. And this is what, and you know, obviously they have to bring in the kids because it's school season. Genius of him to go around passing out money to kids on the street.
Like he's Robin Hood.
Yeah, that he's like, you are like, if we're going to grow ever, we have to hit kids. We have to make sure that
when you say hit kids.
not literally hit kids, but we have to get to the children. We have to get to them and make sure that they know who the head of the street is,
and like
so that they know.
Start the trust early, so that when they grow older,
right,
either they want to participate or not get in the way.
Yeah. Which is why it's such a kick-ass move whenever everyone's just like, hell yeah, man, thanks for the money. And then Michael is like, I see this. Like, I know exactly what's going on right now. Michael's like, I'm not taking your money because I know exactly what this means. I know that I owe you. And out of all the people, you're not the one I want to owe.
And it is insane that we look at Michael at the very beginning, who seems to be, of the four kids that were introduced to, the one who is going to stay the furthest away from the sort of drug crime scene, and instead at the very end literally becomes a soldier for Marlowe. kills Bodhi, and
yeah,
and it's like, but there was never a moment in the show where I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
No, every single instance of Michael doing something was just like, at least I would like to think that this show did like an accurate portrayal, but I was thinking to myself, oh, like this is how it could happen,
yeah,
that it just starts out small, and it starts out from Michael wanting to be a man.
Yeah.
And for example, when it's early in the season, when he and Cuddy and I think his name was Justin go to the boxing match, and then Michael just starts saying these weird things as if he's trying to prove himself.
Yeah.
And that's, at least from my understanding, that's exactly what he's doing. And it's you see kind of where that journey takes him.
Yeah.
Towards the very end.
Oh yeah. Now it makes sense because of like he specifically hates Cuddy because every single time that Cuddy is like, "All right, son, I'm going to take you under my wing," and he's like, "No, I don't need anyone to do that."
Yeah.
Like every time that he feels like he owes someone or that he is dependent on someone, he has to duck out. He has to be on his own.
And then we have this crazy sort of look at Michael and his relationship with his father that we don't know exactly what has separated them metaphorically for so long.
Yeah.
And we don't know the specifics of it. The specifics is never stated. We just know that Michael hates his father and wants him gone. And then to such a point that because his father isn't leaving, that he has Chris and Snoop, Marlowe's like left and right hands, kill Michael's dad. And I think what the show is alluding to, and I don't think I'm far off here, but this is just speculation, that I think what the show is alluding to is that at least perhaps Michael's father sexually assaulted or raped his son.
Yeah.
And I think Chris understood that, like when Michael came up to Chris and Snoop, it was like, hey, I really need you to take care of this guy. And I think kind of like from Chris's reaction and then from how they killed him, which was instead of taking him to a vacant and just shooting him with a silenced pistol, which is how Chris and Snoop have been doing all their kills this season for so many people. Instead, just in this alley, before even taking him into a vacant, Chris literally beats the man to death. And I think it's the show dropping these little hints of like, maybe this was the case of this thing happening, but it's terrifying. It's terrifying to look at, and it also goes to show, that's also maybe partially why Michael makes himself so distant from Cuddy.
Yeah.
That we see the character in Cuddy really, really personally try to make the lives better for these kids. Mm-hmm. And we don't get a lot of those characters at all in this season, And so when that actually happens, and when Cuddy is trying to stick out his neck for Michael, one person in Michael's little posse shoots Cuddy in the leg. They did up
the violence a lot too this season.
They upped the violence a lot, and they upped the stakes a lot personally
did.
For so many of these characters.
Yeah,
too.
They were a lot less afraid to dive into that because I think it's partially because the show has established itself as a dramatic piece regardless of the violence, because that was something that you could tell they didn't want to show because they didn't want to seem like a mystery show or like a cop show.
And the show isn't about the violence.
Not at all. But I think that they have gotten a decent enough ground that they feel the freedom to, we can show violence and people will know that that's not what it's about. Yeah. But that's just there to raise the stakes and to keep it interesting and to keep you invested. Because I was missing that. I was missing that for a couple seasons. Because they would talk about violence and I was like, well, I like that it happened story-wise. I wish that I would have seen it because I would have been so much more invested.
Gotcha. And invested of like maybe for like the cops invested in them trying to get rid of it. Like in the third season, like Bunny trying to get those people off the corners, for example.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. So, and a lot of it is about, I suppose, perspective, because, I mean, one thing that we talked about in directing class a lot back in the college days, was that if one of the Three Stooges accidentally locked themselves in a room and they couldn't get out of the room, and then they accidentally started a fire, you'd start laughing, right?
Yeah.
But if the exact same thing happened and it was a baby in a crib, you simply would not be laughing.
No.
At all. And that's kind of, I think, maybe why they waited till this season to pull out some of the violence, is because earlier on you might have been numbed to it because you're like, like, whenever it's violence, like, we're very used to seeing violence, right? But now it's violence with children, not even teens, preteens, children.
We see Michael beat the shit
Yeah.
out of like a 10-year-old.
Yeah. And that's just simply different. And that hits way different than than whenever at the beginning of the season we watch, what is it, Lex walk up and shoot a guy for like going on a date with his girlfriend or something.
Yeah, and like the first or second episode.
Yeah. And you see that and you're like, damn, that's wild.
Yeah.
But like just watching kids do half the stuff they do later on in the season really hits hard, and I think that might be why they do it.
Because you think in your head, like, kids are not supposed to be doing this. Like, they're supposed to like still be innocent. Like, they're still supposed to like be watching cartoons.
Yeah.
No, they're still watching cartoons and saying F you to everyone and maybe selling drugs on the street. You know?
Even if we don't have kids ourselves, there's still some instinct deep inside every human, every person. And it's not even something that we think about. Instinctually, whenever we see a kid, especially someone that young, which is why I think they might have had him beat up someone even younger for that purpose, is that we have the instinct to protect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That we think to ourselves, Jesus, I want to make sure that kid's okay, and are worried about that kid for that reason. You know what I mean? Because we have that instinct. Yes, I think they did a really solid job of that. I wanted to bring something up because I thought you'd find this hilarious. Think about this.
What a segue by you. What a transition.
Yeah, sorry. Huge left turn. First season, all these people that we get introduced to, and they're gone now. I mean, obviously Wallace. Dee, Stringer Bell, now Bodhi. And who are we left with?
We're left with Poot.
Poot. Fucking Poot. Poot. After all the people, out of everyone first season, the last person you'd expect to still be there is Poot.
Who feels like comedic relief sometimes, especially in the first season.
It's like, the guy's name's Poot.
Yeah.
I mean, what? It's absolutely insane. And, I'm shocked. Oh, and we haven't talked about Dookie at all.
Yes.
I think that's another thing that was really important to me about the Michael and Naaman and Randy and Dookie. The whole like their clan is that they were talking about. It kind of ties in with what we were talking about in terms of Michael, that you can tell that they have this false perception that like manliness is loneliness, or like independence is how you become an adult, and like how you like get treated like one, is that you never talk about your problems or anything like that. And I think the person that has the most reason to discuss their issues or try and get help from them, or like be a little more, like they have the right to complain, is Dookie.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I feel bad for that kid before he even opens his mouth. And they do that. Like, one of the first times you ever see him in the season, they're picking on him, and they come over and like, and it's the people that he's about to be friends with are like, what the hell are you doing, you idiot? And like start messing around with him and stuff. And that's just, that's wild.
I think the growth of Dookie and Prez's relationship is an absolutely beautiful one. And it's, at least, like, Dookie is one of those characters in the show where every single time he's on screen, you say to yourself, I just want your life to get better.
Yeah. I
just want somebody to, like, give you a hand. And so then, like, when Prez gives a little bit of assistance, and then like even his friends like here and there giving a little bit of assistance, maybe like buying him food at one place for like even something small as that. I'm just like, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, like there's like something going in your direction because like this kid needs it, right?
Yeah, truly.
And it's crazy then how, kind of jumping back to a conversation we were having in the first segment, where sometimes schools are making choices that are completely counterintuitive to a kid's interests, that because Dookie was scoring higher than his grade level, they moved him up to 9th grade in high school, and then he just dropped out from school altogether. And we see, because Prez Belusky kind of got a weird vibe from him after he got a Christmas gift from him, and so was able to follow him and find him like being like a money man or something, or being like a runner on the streets.
Yeah.
And it also, like, Dookie was one of those guys that, like, why would he ever be associated with this? Like, he has no interest in this, you know? And you can, like, see that even in sort of, like, just who he is and how he interacts with other people. Like, why would he ever want to be a part of this life? And then we just see it's still so easy for them just to do it. And sometimes, once again, it's still the easier path.
And then you see him with Michael in that same shot.
Maybe. I think also, like, there's a possibility that still at the end of the season, like, Dookie is living with Michael. Like, we saw a little bit of that.
Yeah, right.
And so it's not terribly far-fetched for Dookie to maybe get involved a little bit, because it's right there, and because that feels more comfortable for him. Like, he doesn't want to expose himself and be vulnerable, you know, to a place that he doesn't trust. So he's going to close himself off and be a runner, and that's what's going to happen, right? And like, sometimes we see particularly in this season, where if a person doesn't do like the absolute most they can possibly do, then that's it for that kid's lives, right? So we see that with Prez, right? That maybe this is just a case of like, if Prez took Dookie in, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Or if Dookie wasn't placed in 9th grade, maybe this wouldn't have happened. If Carver was able to take Randy in instead of putting him in a group home, maybe him getting potentially killed, you know, maybe that wouldn't happen. But we see, or like Cuddy taking in Michael, maybe him becoming a soldier for Marlowe and having his father be killed, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But what we do see happen is how they incorporated Bunny into the season and his relationship with Naaman. And who Naaman is at the beginning of the season.
I love Bunny in this season.
I love Bunny in the season as well, and I think they do a really good job. Dude. And they do a really good job of like adjusting his character to the situation.
And especially coming off season 3, which was such a cool Bunny season.
And the thing is, they didn't need to have Bunny in the season.
No.
Right? But you and I, we both appreciate the shit out of this show.
Yeah.
Because of how they were able to bring Bunny back in an effective and efficient manner.
Yeah.
And how he still played a very big role in the story, because of how he was trying to help change this one kid's life, Naaman, who was Weebei's son. And we see at the very beginning of the season, like, if you looked at those 4 kids and you say to yourself, if you just had to pick one kid that was going to be involved in like street crimes, whatever, for the rest of his life, who's it going to be? Your gut is, with how the characters are introduced, your gut is going to be Naaman.
Yeah.
And then Naaman is the one that's absolutely the farthest at the very end. And Bunny takes in Naaman as a sort of a foster son. And it goes to show that, like, Bunny had to bend over backwards, doubly so, in order to make sure this kid was okay. And he was one of, if not like 2 or 3 characters in this season that was able to recognize that, like, if I don't do the absolute most, this kid's life is as good as gone. And
that's
and
for
hardly,
one kid.
That's for one kid. And hardly any other character in this show, in this season, has that realization. Not Carcetti. Carver hardly realizes until the end. Definitely not Herc. It's so many of these people have no idea what they're doing. And Bunny's the only one that says to himself, if I don't actually participate actively in this kid's life and actively try to make this kid's life better and show him love, then this kid's life is in the gutter. End of story.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we get to Carcetti, because we haven't talked much about him, and goodness gracious, that was a very important part of the season. And and we both said we loved it, but I really wanted to
press on that once more.
I really did, because Carcetti, we see a huge shift in this guy.
Yeah,
I mean 180.
And once again, it's understated, the shift, much like Presbeluski's, that it's not night and day of Carcetti all of a sudden becoming a different person towards the end. It's just these little tiny actions, these little tiny events in his life that are happening here and there that are shifting him towards becoming a different person.
And yeah, well, the cool thing about it is that, just like you said, it is 180, but it's very slow. It's very progressive, because it's not as much that you see him changing and you're like, oh wow, he's changing, good for him. It's that you end up feeling one way about Carcetti, and then you're like, wait, I did not feel like this a moment ago. I used to hate the shit out of you, and now I'm very interested in what happens to you. And that's super cool. And I'm glad
because we partially start to believe in him too.
Right.
And of course, naturally, because we're kind of following him as well. But and once again, another perfect example. I know I'm beating a dead horse here. I know I'm sounding like a broken record, where somebody is shown to be an asshole and simultaneously have really good ideas or ambitions.
Yeah.
And that is the case of Carcetti, that has cheated on his wife, potentially at least once that we saw, and is just sort of misogynistic sometimes, and also is interested in the betterment of the city of Baltimore.
Yeah. And at the very least, far better than Royce. I mean, holy crap. That guy sucks. The more and more time that you see him behind closed doors, you're like, oh God, you're awful.
But
I want you out so bad.
We see how much elections take over the lives politicians.
And it is so alarming. And I think, I wish I saw more shows about this. It's so alarming how much of current sitting officials' careers are about getting reelected.
Yes.
The fact that
or
Royce
moving up the ladder.
Right. The fact that, for instance, Royce, that he has to put aside all of his mayoral duties for the few weeks that it takes for him to run a re-election campaign, or like any of the cops that we see, any of the officers that we see going up the ranks, that so much of their they have to make the active decision to put aside their real job in order to work on moving up the ladder.
Yes, chain of command.
Yeah, and funny enough, the same is, oh gosh, and I hate to bring it back to this, the same is actually true of teaching, because it takes so much time and effort to lesson plan, and to figure out what you're doing day to day, especially if you teach more than one subject. Like if you're teaching like the same class like 7 times a day, then whatever, good for you. But whenever you're teaching like 2, 3, even 4 classes, sometimes different, it takes so much time lesson planning. But if you really want to, you can take time out and fill out all of your paperwork and make it look pristine, and be like applying for stuff and be like making a really awesome portfolio for yourself, so that you can become a principal or a counselor or move up the ladder. But you have to make the active decision to put aside your actual work in order to do that. And that has always blown my mind and has made me, it's just so slimy. It's so
sick.
slimy.
It's sick.
Because there are people that I see that they are principals and they're like 30 years old, and I'm like, you tell me you taught for like 5 years and became a principal? Are we serious here? Like, really? We both know that you're not just like a master teacher. Come on. Like, you work the system. That's why you're here. And you like walk around with that fake smile. That's why we know. We know that you're here because you're working you're playing the game. It's so weird. But yeah, Carcetti really rocks, and that was that was a lovely arc and a lovely little thing that we got to experience, because goodness gracious, Carcetti is
interesting.
Yeah,
just interesting to go on that journey with.
Yeah. And such a cool cast of characters that you see in the show because of Carcetti that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Yes, and that even though when Carcetti was introduced in the third season, that his degrees of connection wasn't really to anyone that we had met, really. At least not like directly per se. But it helped show this side to the city that the showrunners and writers really wanted to show, and I think they've done an incredible job of showcasing that with this one person. I also want to touch on briefly how clever it was and how smart it was about what they did with McNulty in this season.
Oh, yeah.
Where we get a lot of Jimmy McNulty in Season 1, in Season 2, and in Season 3. That one can argue that Jimmy McNulty is the main character of The Wire.
Yeah.
However, the main character of The Wire is most definitely the city of Baltimore.
Yeah, yeah.
And there should not be a question about that. And maybe there was a conversation in the background of like, look, we've had a lot of Jimmy McNulty. We sort of kind of like wrapped up his arc per se in the third season with his own personal experience and him realizing that he needs to be more. Mm-hmm. And instead of doing like the dumb bullshit of like sometimes shows like to do where a character experiences a breakthrough but then they immediately pedal back, because that just doesn't feel good to watch.
Yeah, true.
Instead, we see Jimmy McNulty be a better person.
And he's just happy.
He doesn't really drink anymore. He's with Beatty, and the kids like him, and he's...
Good match, too.
He's just happy. Sweet. And, like, every single scene you watch McNulty, you're just happy. And you're just happy that he's happy.
Yeah, right.
Like, you were so messed up, but it took you, there was a lot of pain before you got to this moment. And I'm just happy to see that you are happy and you're not hurting anyone either, and you're not hurting yourself either.
Yeah.
But it was also the show kind of like taking a step back of like, this show is not about Jimmy McNulty, and then choosing to like put him and make him more of a side character.
Yeah.
But he never felt sort of not present, you know?
And which I honestly wish that they would have showed him a little less, because it is very refreshing to see McNulty whenever you do, and you're like, oh,
Jimmy,
I miss you. Look at you.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, like a happy McNulty, just you're like that's not dramatically interesting, obviously. Yeah. And so it's like I like that he's there, but they don't need to show him as much as they did. I don't think. I think they could have made him even a smaller character. But
because part of the storytelling was McNulty's journey.
Yeah.
And
it's just not that anymore.
And they wanted to, yeah, exactly. It's not that anymore. And they wanted to complete his journey at the end of the third season. So what personal journey is there more for this character, right? We get like different stakes and different objectives for him when it comes to like helping Bodhi out in order to help the city of Baltimore out and to put Marlo in cuffs. But in terms of his personal journey, we don't get that this season because he's completed it.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a really bold choice for a show to do. Like, I can't think of another show that somebody could be considered like the main character and then becomes a side character in the fourth season, because the show is not about him. It's about the city, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that this show decided to have McNulty take the back seat, because it's clear that this show's priority is like the other people's journey or this city's journey. Hell, we didn't even get to Bubbles.
Oh, which is a shame because Bubbles is so interesting in the season.
And then we also and that's another example of Bubbles trying to take care of a kid.
Yeah.
And arguably maybe like Bubbles didn't do enough, and that ends up with the kid overdosing, and then Bubble attempts to commit suicide. At the detective's interrogation room, right? And like we're only touching on it briefly, but we see a lot of Bubbles in the season too. But like so much of this season is kind of like making you, the viewer, ask yourself, like what can I do? Like what I'm doing right now is not enough. And the show, I'm burping a lot. And the show makes you realize that. Makes you like really look in the mirror and really say to yourself, more so than the third season, like, oh, like I'm part of the problem. And and it's not like other like documentaries or movies or TV shows where there's this like big thing going on and like maybe like you could help out, but no, there was something like different about this because it wasn't like it wasn't just like a race or gender or like a color or creed, just religion. Like it wasn't anything like that. It was like there was, I guess, something different for me personally. Like it had to do with kids, and like whenever I watch something like kids are involved, that always puts me like in unease. Like I think the best way to describe this is there's a Greek play called Medea.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people love Medea. I hate Medea.
Because of the kids?
Simply because Medea kills her own children in order to get back at her husband who cheated on her. And so, like, I like understand symbolically, like, what makes Medea impressive is, like, the female empowerment of it, but I'm always off-put. Like, in the case of this play, I'm just using this play as an example, but I'm just always off-put because Medea kills not only her children, but like children who are innocent.
Yeah.
Just so she could have revenge. And so there was something different about this season that like we saw so clearly, super duper clearly, the path of somebody's inactivity or stupid activity leading to a child's life being potentially ruined forever. And that's part of the reason what makes this season so impactful. We're going a bit long, so before we wrap this up, I just want to give my gold medal, and I have 4 gold medals.
Oh shit! Okay.
And I'm sure you know which 4.
Well, that makes sense. Okay, yeah.
It is Julio McCullum's Naaman, Tristan Mark Wilds' is Michael, Maestro Harrell's is Randy, and Jermaine Crawford's Dookie.
Yeah, they rocked.
That. I've never seen like kids of that age
do that
act so well.
Yeah,
in my entire life.
I hate to say this, but I'm even including Michael B. Jordan in season 1.
Yeah.
Like I think that this really is some of the best child acting I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. To like the point, I'm just like, how did they find these kids?
Right. That's what I kept thinking to myself too. And also, not just that, but how did they find all these kids whose parents allowed them to say these words on television, but also be a part of such violent scenes? And I think, and I was thinking
very
that for
real
a moment.
things. Too.
Yeah, I was thinking that for a moment, and then I realized, if I was a parent and I lived in Baltimore, I would totally let my kid be in that show because they're doing real shit.
Yeah.
Like, why would I not let them be a part of that? Because this show, just like we said, is not just violent scenes, and it's not just like curse words or whatever, like seeing like the dumb shit kids do. It's about the community. It's about Baltimore. It's about these real honest moments. So yeah, the show is now officially important enough to let your kids do that. Yeah. Sorry, that was just a thought that I had as I was watching the show.
No, I'm very happy that you said that. And I also just want to mic drop the sizzle serve, which I'm just trying to fill out my notes.
Okay,
mic drop the sizzle serve. That at least for me, I think this is the best season of television. Period. I think the only thing to compare it to in my personal record book is the first season of Broadchurch. But that's very different.
It's so good.
It's very different because Broadchurch in the first season is introducing characters and introducing a storyline, where this season manages to continue a storyline and then tell it in this fascinating way that, like, what's different is that, like, Broadchurch is also a very, very good story. And not only is this season, the 4th season of The Wire, a very good story, but thematically intensely impactful.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier in the first segment, I think about some of the scenes in this every single day. And I think about some of the characters in it every single day, to such a point. God damn it, I'm just loading everything right now.
Go.
I had a nightmare.
Really?
I had a nightmare that Randy was killed.
Really?
And that I was, like, fuming in this nightmare because, like, as if, like, I was in this show and, like, I was a person on this show. And so then I went up to Herc and I'm like, how could you have done this? You have no idea what you realize. And, like, I woke up in, like, a cold sweat and I was like, that wasn't real, you know? But there was, like, something that felt very real. And I think it's a testament to how the show portrays its people. And it's not just characters, it's people.
Yeah.
And I cannot think of another show that does that to such detail as this one.
I gotta say, I definitely have a specific opinion about what the best single episode of television is.
I laid it on thick.
You did. That was a good serve. I can think of another single episode of TV that is the best episode of TV, which hopefully we'll get to someday.
The best season of TV?
No, single episode. But,
I see.
But in terms of seasons, I think I could agree with it. Off the top of my head, at least. I don't think that I can think of another whole season.
Right, and this is just, like, from what I've seen, but, like...
Yeah. That makes sense, though.
Like, I wasn't, like, sometimes driven to tears because of, like, oh, no, this character died. It was like, no, like, this person's life is gone. And not just, like, literally, like, they're not dead. Like, no, they're still going to live, but they're never going to come back from this. Like, their life is ruined.
I'm going to make you watch something, and it is... it's something that we're going to have to talk about in the season 5 episode because it is interviews with the people who created the show, and they invited some of the people whose lives the show is based on.
Good, because the reason why I haven't, like, looked into a lot of detail information in the story, like, behind the show, right, is because I don't want to spoil myself.
Yeah.
And we're gonna definitely delve into that so much more when we finish the 5th season. Mac, is there, like, anything else you want to lay on thick?
I mean, okay, so this is all I want to do real quick. Give me one word.
And this episode is so long because, like, I mean,
it's
there's a lot to discuss in this season. There's a lot to discuss.
There are a lot of characters that they're capitalizing on from the past 4 seasons.
Yes.
And as we just said, this might be the best season of television that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
So I just want to get a one for all the characters that we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah.
I would love to get a one word from you in terms of how you felt about them this season. Ready?
How I felt about them this season.
Yeah, this is a rapid fire game.
Here we go, rapid fire. Here we go, baby.
Freeman.
I like he's always go. Oh, do you just want one bird? Yeah. I mean, one bird. One word.
Bird.
Relentless.
Good. Bunk.
And not spiteful, but like reminiscent.
Daniels.
I just want him to do something. I can't sometimes like one word doesn't enough to
that's
express
perfect. One phrase at least. That's good.
Emotion.
Bubbles.
Pity.
Oh, ain't that the truth? Kima, I guess.
I want you to be better.
Yeah, it's like I don't have a whole lot for Kima. Oh, Herc.
I've never and then like Dominic Dotsy. I'm sorry that I'm butchering this name. Is just a perfect casting.
Oh yeah,
for Herc.
He's so good
from the very first season, and then to this one as well. Is like, of course, this guy would F up so many times in this fashion.
Oh my god!
And it's painful to watch because it's never like it's not like oh my goodness, the son in the second season. It's holy crap.
Oh.
How can we forget his name? I'm on it. But it's not like the son in the second season where he's constantly doing foolish things and it's just not making sense one bit. Instead, we have in this season where, holy hell, we can't find him.
Nicky.
Ziggy. I'm talking about Ziggy.
Oh, the son of... Yeah, you're right.
That, like, Ziggy...
He whips his dick out, yeah.
Yeah, that Ziggy's like... This character feels stupid.
Yeah.
But, like, Herc, we see the sort of, like, thought processes behind his decision. And, like, you're making really stupid decisions, and you're stupid, but I'm not frustrated at you as a character. I'm frustrated at you as a person and what you're doing. But I'm not frustrated at you because what you're doing doesn't make sense. Because there were so many times that Ziggy was doing things that, like, just didn't make sense. And, like, always felt like it was, like, counterintuitive to his objective.
Yeah.
But there was never a moment that, like, Herc did something that felt counterintuitive to his own objective.
Yeah.
Like, even though all the shit that he was doing was stupid as hell, I'm like, okay, why you made that decision makes sense. Mm-hmm. And makes sense for you.
Well, another thing that I did not know until recently, because I like watching the interviews with the actors, and not interviews in terms of like about The Wire, but just like about them, because I'm interested, right? Because like they have cool careers and they're cool people and they're very good, obviously. But I was watching this one thing about how they treat actors and like send-offs and stuff like that. And because at the very end of whenever a character's done, it'll say at the end of that episode script, because they get the script for each episode like as they're shooting it. And like it's new every time, and so at the very end it will say season wrap on, and then the character, right?
Huh.
And so like whenever you're done, and you also know whenever like obviously it says you died or whatever, right?
Yeah. You'll know because you acted.
You'll know because it's said. There is not a single character on the entire show of The Wire that was ever aware of them being sent off the show prior to it happening.
Interesting. Could you... I mean,
like why?
Let's just have this episode run long, because I'm just loving this conversation.
Yeah, so, like, for instance, if you're the actor playing Bodhi, and you show up for the finale of Season 4, you have no idea that you're getting killed at the end of this episode.
Why is that? I mean, but
I know, but you don't know until you read the script of the final episode. Gotcha. You act all of Season 4, not knowing that you're going to die.
Like you're not. I understand now. You're not told at the beginning of the season, "Hey, you're going to die."
Yeah,
in this season.
They don't give any plans to anyone, and they give as much as they possibly can to the actors to make sure that they can
and like so they can understand their givens and understand.
It's not like
okay,
Marvel.
well, what are my needs? What are my objectives?
Yeah.
Like, what do I need in order to like fulfill the life of this character?
Because that's my least favorite part about Marvel is that they will hold information on backstories, and it's like. Don't I need to know this shit for me to play the character?
Or like I think the greatest example, Endgame spoilers, I guess, but like there's the funeral scene in Endgame, and they told everyone that it was actually like a wedding or something. That like, mind you, all those actors are incredible. Tony Stark's funeral. Mac looked at me with an inquisitive look. Where they told all the actors.
I was just thinking, because that would piss me off as an actor.
Yeah, but like I understand, like it's in order to keep spoilers wrapped, especially in like the sort of social media climate that we're living in now, that everything is so easily spoiled. So like I understand that from a storyteller perspective, but then like as an actor perspective, like. Kudos to them, but also like shit. That's frustrating.
I understand it from a producing perspective, not even from a storytelling perspective, because just the producers are the ones that are worried about it leaking. Yeah. Everyone else is like, I mean, really? Come on, like let's just. As an actor, I would like to fucking know if it's Tony Stark's funeral.
Yeah.
I don't want you telling me it's something else and then you editing my acting job. I would like to, for you to at least trust me with that. But that's something that The Wire was really good about. Is that they
keeping everything honest.
Honest, absolutely. But making sure that everyone knew that in the same way that because like they would make the set and the moments and the way they treated everything was as real and honest as possible, including the send-offs where they were like, you have no idea when you're going, and I want to make sure that you feel that. I want to make sure that every single episode you have no idea when you're going, and they didn't, and like this, the cast didn't understand that until they showed up and Wallace was dead in season 1, and so they show up and Wallace dies, and no one knew, and they kind of look to Michael B. Jordan, and he's just like sobbing because he's like, "What the." Was
this
serious?
an interview? I have to like watch this.
Well, it's like a couple interviews. Yeah, there's like a couple different. Yeah. But he's just like, oh my god, what? And well, actually, the person that has the best interviews that is always really really fun to watch is the actor that plays Bubbles, who is
Andre Royo.
Thank you, Andre Royo. I was looking for it. And he has some really really cool interviews. But yeah, one of the things he talked about a bunch was his relationship with the other actors in the cast, because whenever they showed up, a lot of these people, funny enough, were written to be like one-off characters, like Kima, like Freeman, like Herc.
Like I really thought after the first season we were not going to see Bubbles again.
Yeah, and so most of these characters were not supposed to be season regulars, and whenever the actors showed up, they just made a clear case for themselves to stay. And the writers were like, fuck yes, please stay. And like, so by the 4th season, you have just a plethora of actors that you've like gained, that they're only actors that have fought for their part and for themselves. Yeah. So it's like a stellar cast by this point. And also all these actors that have a serious understanding of next episode I could be off.
Yeah.
I'm never going to know because they never give us even a hint. And every person that's ever been killed off has been shocked by it. So I could be going, like, next episode.
And what's beautiful about that is, like, implicitly then, like, every actor there is acting as if it's their last.
Right. And Andre Royo talked about how he was like, that obviously, like, for the officers, it's like, oh, man, I hope you don't go home or whatever. But the main thing that it changed was the cast of the gangs and the cast of the drug dealers and the cast of the street crew, because all of them, it was a lot more like they had to be yeah like they had to be really really close and work really really tightly with one another, and all of a sudden that might all change next week.
And it wasn't like an actor would be doing a poor job and think to themselves, man, like that's it, you know, like Idris Elba acted circles around so many people that I think to myself, why has Idris Elba not had a more illustrious career after this? How did Marvel shaft him as being Heimdall? How did they do that when it's Idris bleeping Elba?
Yeah.
And even though he was acting circles around every person in every scene, he was still killed off in the 3rd season, right?
And they gave him progressively more and more parts throughout the Thors, but Thor Ragnarok, he's still barely even in it. It's more than anything else he's ever gotten.
And they kill him at the beginning of Infinity War. It's just
right.
It's just.
But even
and then you remember, it's like, oh my god, that's Idris Elba. I can't believe they did that to him.
He's still one of the best parts of Thor Ragnarok, even though he's in only like 45 collective seconds of the movie. He's so good. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so were there?
Well, we still managed to talk about Idris Elba in this season.
We have to though. He's so good.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
Yeah, I think we got it all out there.
Yeah, that's it.
I think we did. That's gonna be a bitch to upload.
And anyway. I cannot wait to start the 5th season.
Yeah, same. Same.
Because now, like, after watching the 3rd season, especially this season, like, I will give this show my children. Like, that's how much I trust it.
You're gonna start naming your children after the characters?
Sure.
Who would it be? McNulty?
I would just call my child McNulty.
Oh, first name McNulty, last
One
name
of the
LaBelle.
funniest parts in this season is how Beatty's kids
just call McNulty. That's so good. That's like, good.
So Bunk talks to them and is like, so what do you call him? McNulty? Not Jimmy, not Dad, not, Mr. Pops. McNulty, not Pops. No, McNulty. And it's perfect.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And of course.
That's what everyone calls him.
And I love him. God bless his
I am excited to watch season 5 too, but before we get to season 5,
yes,
we're watching next week.
Yep.
I've been holding on this one.
Okay.
And I'm really excited about it. I was about to back and forth between 2 of the same writer, but I've decided to go with Fleabag.
Both seasons?
Both seasons of Fleabag. It's a quick watch.
Yeah.
Like less than 10 hours.
Yeah.
It's a quick watch, really, really fun show, and I'm excited to talk about it because there's a lot of... I've been sitting on this one a long time. Like, this really weighs heavy on my heart, so I'm excited to share it with you.
Dope. I'm just happy.
Me too. Thank you so much for an awesome episode.
Before we end, you want to know who killed Randy in my dream?
Who?
Michael Cera.
Michael Cera as Michael Cera?
Or I don't know, but it was like...
It's just the face.
But it was the actor Michael Cera as like another character. But like everything was real at the same time. So it was still Michael Cera as this character.
Goodness gracious. Michael Cera.
Thank you for listening.